This is Marriage on the Half Shell, Raw and Exposed. What did we decide to name this one? You didn't give me... Like, we had bounced around several names.
Bounced around Marriage Superglue.
There you go.
And Why Wait? I think that is a working title. Maybe that's what it still is. I
Okay,
don't know.
not sure.
The other one was Don't Do the Deed.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what it'll be.
Okay.
That sounds more fun.
It does.
Anyway, what are we talking about? So last episode we talked about the feminine mistake and how feminism has affected culture, and we're going to talk a little bit more about culture, but then we're going to talk about basically why we don't want to have sex before marriage, and from a non-religious point of view. And
right.
We'll talk about morals a little bit, but the main thing is the scientific point of view of why we wait, and then there's some other stuff we'll include. I did want to kind of, it's not a disclaimer, but it's a note, I guess, before we start is, we're not passing judgment on anyone who's had sex before marriage. We weren't pure.
No. We regret it too. We regret it,
but,
yes.
But, so we're not passing judgment. We're not saying it's impossible to have a good marriage if you didn't wait, because we're not statistics. We've talked about that before.
Yeah.
While the statistics do show that if you do wait, you're happier in your marriage.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we're not statistics, so we're not saying it's impossible. Marriage is always hard work anyway.
Right.
So anyway, so we this is to help everyone rethink the message we got from the culture, and we're still getting from the culture.
It's just getting worse too. I think.
And we can talk about that.
Yeah.
About the culture says sex is no big deal. Have as much as you want. It's try new things, do all these experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's no consequences, and we'll show why that's not true,
right? And
why we should rethink this message.
Mm-hmm.
And I doubt the culture will change, but people within it who hear this message or hear the same message from other people may change their minds, and we should teach our children about this.
Yeah.
Right. So some of this, so if you look at the past, and we were talking about, do we include morality in this? And really, we're not coming at this from a morality perspective.
Not this time.
Not this
I think
time.
we have. Well, we've talked about sex within the confines of marriage in a previous podcast, but this is a different.
Right, exactly. So it's not from a religious point of view.
Well, I mean, disclaimer, we've said multiple times we are Christians.
Sure.
And so this is something that, from our own convictions, that we do believe that waiting until marriage is the right thing to do. But what we want to do is show you that there's actual research that's been done by multiple neuroscientists and other psychiatrists or whoever.
Well, there's some psychiatrists and,
right.
And neuroscientists.
Yeah.
True.
That shows why God created us to wait until marriage, until we have sex. I mean, there's legitimate medical research that's gone into this.
Yeah.
And it's not just religious or moral or, it is those things, but there's other things going on too.
Yeah. And this may sound like a heavy subject, so we're going to have, it's interesting. So hang in there. It's really, because it's not just talking about why you should wait, but also how you can improve your marriage with the knowledge of how things work.
Sure.
How
Yeah.
you want to, whether you want to say created or designed or evolved or whatever. The morals are just
They're guardrails.
guardrail, yes, that help us, as we think about it, right? And I'll also say that there's more to it than just neurotransmitters, for instance. I'm going to talk about those, but
Yeah.
there's how you feel, what you're thinking,
Yeah.
and all of that. But if you really want to, get into how basically how we're bonded together as a couple, that's what we're going to talk about,
Right.
along with some good reasons that are not religious, again, and maybe not even moral, but reasons to wait. And we'll talk about those. And if this thing goes longer than an hour or so, then we'll cut it up into two. So just be forewarned.
Okay.
So one other thing, we were talking about purity culture.
Yes.
And how that was like when our kids were younger. So about 10, 15 years ago.
Longer than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The purity culture, and it's talked about in a negative way. And I can see why. Because it basically told girls, if you have sex before marriage, you're losing your value as a person. And that's not true. At least as Christians, we see people valuable. Every person is valuable because they're made in the image of God, right? And purity culture kind of really mess with that. But then if you look at what some psychiatrists are talking about today, whatever you might think of psychiatry, they evaluate how people look at each other based on their sexual past. And if you've had at least a promiscuous past, then people, and again, we're outside of religion here, people will see you as less valuable. And there are analogies and stuff that they use and so on. And I'm not going to go into that, but so I'm not saying purity culture is the way to teach all this, but but if you look at what psychiatry is saying, they're basically saying what purity culture used to say.
Right.
Today. So I don't know if that's, again, still true. I don't think we should look at people that way. So I'm just trying to be clear about that.
Right.
We don't look at each other as less valuable because we did some things in our past. It's what are you doing now, and
right,
what the future looks like. Okay, so that's all of the notes ahead of time. So again, we're all to say we're not passing judgment. You shouldn't pass judgment on yourself or anyone else. And you had some stuff that you wanted to talk about related to
which
that
is like,
article you read?
Yeah. So Evie, it's a pretty good magazine. They have some decent articles, and we just read one before we started today. Yep. And one statistic that I read said 43% of women regret losing their virginity. And they're not talking about marital, waiting till you get married and losing your virginity. They are talking about you're 18, you go off to college, and, you lose your virginity, or you're in high school. And these days, unfortunately, it's even younger than that.
Yeah.
Because of the way society is laid out at the moment. It's pretty bad. And the way sex ed is being taught at this point is just about as bad as it can possibly be. They're showing, kindergartners they're starting sex ed in kindergarten in a lot of places, and they're showing these kids things that little kids are not supposed to see.
Well, they're not mature enough to
No, they're,
handle.
well, in the way I heard it was that whatever sexual urges you have are kind of lodged in the back of your brain until you hit puberty, and then they move to the front of your brain. So it becomes more of something you deal with once you become a teenager. And that kind of made sense to me. Right? So now you're taking this 5 to 10-year-old and you're exposing them to these sexual things, and they don't know how to handle it. They don't know what that is. Now they're starting to feel urges that they're not supposed to feel because they're not old enough to deal with it. You know, so all that. And then the education around sex just continues to get worse the further you get into, well, mostly the public school system. So that's what society is teaching kids about sex, that it's no big deal. That it's no big deal if you have it multiple times with multiple people.
It doesn't mean anything.
It doesn't mean anything. So there's no, it's just fun. It's just exercise. There's no consequences. They do teach these kids there's really no consequences to having multiple partners.
Yeah.
Right? And this is part of, well, you and I, we had a little philosophical discussion about this, because if you talk to most kids these days about their school subjects, if you ask them which subject is the most boring, they're going to say
history,
which is pathetic and sad and awful, because history is not boring. It's not. But here's why I'm making this connection. If we're not teaching these kids about the past and about how important things that happened in the past are, then I think I made this point in the last podcast as well. If you're not rooted in the past, then you're not thinking about the future either. And there's a whole mindset right now around live in the moment. Be in the moment, live in the moment, do what feels good right now. You know, you don't have to think about yesterday, and you don't have to think about the consequences of what you're about to do. If it feels good, do it. That's right out of the 60s, right?
Sure.
What's the other one now? Be unburdened by what has been. And you can't do it. You can't do it. So, you know, it does not matter what your actions are, particularly around sex. There will be consequences. They will be negative or positive, depending upon the situation, but there are going to be consequences.
Yep.
There will be. And so all I'm saying is, if your kid is coming home and saying, history is boring, you need to go on some field trips. You need to make sure your kid is rooted in what has been, so that they can bear the burden of what is coming up next.
Yes.
It's the opposite of what is being said right now. It's the opposite. And so this connects to the sex thing, because sex, it can be one of these things that kids just impulsively do. You know?
Well, you're taught
that it's okay to be impulsive.
You're supposed to be doing this.
Yes.
Right? And the article talked about girls going to college. It's like everything pushes them to just do it.
Just lose your virginity and get it over with.
Just get it over with. It's no big deal. You don't even have to enjoy it that much. You know, try people out, have the experience, etc., etc.
No. There are good, legitimate scientific reasons for not doing that, which is why we're going to talk about this. But, you know, if that's what your teachers are teaching your kids, or if you're teaching your kids that stuff, you need to think about that.
Yep.
You need to think about it.
Okay. Should we
There's
get
my
into
philosophical rant. Go
your
ahead.
Rant?
Yeah.
I couldn't wait for that. That was awesome. Okay, so I'm going to just walk through a few things related to the physical aspect of what goes on in our brains during sex and other things. Okay. So there are basically, so we're talking about neurotransmitters, and there are three that, from all of my research, and there may be others that come in a little bit here and there, but these main three are what happens during sex, and then other activities that I'll get into. So of course there's dopamine. We've heard a lot about that. That's the reward chemical, the feel-good chemical.
Right.
Okay. You get that during taking risks, doing new activities, things like driving fast. Things like,
heck yeah. I've had that one.
Oh, yeah. Me too. Not lately, but, when I was younger. I don't know about you recently, but...
I haven't been caught. I'm not going to say anything.
Okay, whatever. All right. Sex outside of marriage. It would be included.
Right.
But also sex within marriage.
Yeah.
So what's happening is, so you get the rewards, and also, scrolling, seeing the number of likes you got on a post or something like that gets you a little dopamine. So it's an addictive chemical that our bodies make, that when managed properly, when you do the activities properly, it gives you the reward, but you don't want to get addicted.
Right.
And the issue with that is doing the activities that give you all these dopamine hits, but nothing else around it, that then you can get addicted to the scrolling, for instance, or even addicted to sex.
Yeah.
Or addicted to the adrenaline of some risky activity, right? So there's adrenaline too. I'm not going to be talking about that, but that combined with dopamine, right? The dopamine is what gives you the addiction. Anyway, so that plays a part. Okay, and then the other two that I'm going to talk about, both are created in our bodies, and in women there's there's oxytocin and vasopressin, and women create more oxytocin than men, and men are affected more, create more vasopressin than women, even though they're both there, and they both play a part, but they come at different times. So that's what I'm going to get to. So oxytocin, for women, for instance, during sex, what happens is it bonds you to the man that you're having sex with. You feel close. You think there's trust anyway. Sometimes there is, and sometimes there isn't.
I remember my dad telling me you'll never be more vulnerable with a man than when you get naked and jump in bed with him.
Yes.
And vulnerability requires trust. Has to be there.
But that doesn't necessarily mean it's there, especially with hookups.
Oh, no.
Right?
Yeah.
So oxytocin bonds you, and what it's doing is it when I say bonds, it's like creating a neurological pathway that says this is normal, this is nice, this is great with this guy. I feel safe.
Feeling safe for a woman is huge.
Right.
It's huge.
Yes, that is true. You can get oxytocin in other ways too, like if you hug a guy for 20 seconds, like that's a long hug, but if you do that, you're gonna get some oxytocin. Maybe not as much during sex, but you're gonna get it. Holding hands, being generous, things that can be the natural part of building a relationship. All right. Okay. But men are more affected by a transmitter called vasopressin. And what it does, it does kind of the same thing that says, oh, this is normal. But it's created by solving problems together. Okay? Achieving a goal or achieving a mission. And it causes you to value your partner. Right? As a man, you value your partner. And that's why you see men who go to war together.
I was just about to say that.
They're in these experiences
right.
together, and they could be totally different people and come from different walks of life. And
most of the time, that's the case.
And all of that, and they're put together in these situations, and they have this lifelong friendship because they solved a problem together, which was to survive and to go do whatever missions they had to do.
Yeah.
And you can get that from other places too, like go do an escape room, right? And you are solving problems together, right? So it's not always sexual. I mean, you feel closer together by doing things like that, and you can do that as you build a relationship. You can do stuff like that. But this is what happens during sex. The thing is, during sex, from the man's perspective, there probably isn't a problem to solve. There's no mission, right? Unless he really wants you, the partner, to feel good.
Yeah.
To, have an orgasm, to experience the full experience, unless he's thinking like that. And most of the time in hookup culture,
you're not.
You're not doing that, right? So he's not going to get that as much, and he's not going to bond.
Yeah.
And so you end up with the issue of the woman being bonded in her mind to the man, but the man's not bonded to her, right? And it's just a hookup to him. And I used to see this a lot during when I was in college many years ago, and you'd hear about it. It's like the guy's not really into the girl, but he's just dating her because she's fun and she'll go to bed.
Yeah.
Right. And she's thinking, and women can still do this today. If I give him sex, he'll want to marry me.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work like that. Right? It doesn't work like that. And I'm not talking about situations where you're kind of forced to get married because you had a kid.
Right.
I'm just talking about the sexual acts and so on.
Yeah.
So, girls out there listening to this, it isn't going to make him want to marry you.
Right.
Right. There are other things for that you can do and should do as you build a relationship. Mm-hmm. But sex isn't it.
Yeah.
It's not going to do it. So when you get into the hookup culture, or even just relationship after relationship, even if it's not just hookups or friends with benefits, you end up with this situation where, from the man's perspective, it's just easy, free sex, no consequences. This is normal, right? Mm-hmm. And he'll just move on. He's not going to have a problem until marriage, when he's getting married, but he's doing it from a mental perspective. He's deciding to get married, but he's trained himself to think multiple partners are the way to go. So he ends up, the risk of cheating is there, from his perspective, because that's what he's trained himself to do. That's what society has said is right to do. from the woman's part, she bonds to a guy and then the bond is broken. And then she'll bond to the next guy and the bond is broken. I wrote this down. Let's see. Bonding. Yeah, I'm trying to find my notes. Where you get this situation that you keep breaking this bond. Anyway, it's in my head. You keep breaking this bond, and it makes, I don't want to say it damages you. That's not what I'm saying. But it trains you. It makes it difficult. So then you say you spend your 20s hookups, hookup after hookup, I'm having my fun, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then you decide, okay, I'm 30, I want to have a kid, I want to get married. And you find some guy to settle down with, and basically you're settling for him, and no guy wants that.
Right.
And also, the way you've trained yourself, you haven't trained yourself to bond to him properly.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, and if both of you have done this, then you're not going to be as bonded as well together.
Right.
Right? But what you want, yes, you want the morals, like we said, they're the guardrails, but you want to do the things that we would normally do, and we'll talk about those, to become bonded together. They've done experiments where married couples, they've shown that they can show a picture of a man's wife to him, and then show him a picture of another woman of similar level of beauty, however you want to define that. And he will always find his wife more beautiful, even though they're, from an objective observer, they're probably the same.
Mm-hmm.
Different women, but
right,
but the same beauty. So there's a bond there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what you want to do, I guess, should I talk about, what you want to do? Or we can talk about that later. I don't know.
I'm not sure which direction you were going after this.
Yeah.
So
Okay. I think I've just covered how it all works.
Yeah.
And the negative aspects of hookup culture.
Right.
Right. So let's talk about, as we said earlier, there's no judgment, but it's not like if you've done this and you're 30, 35, that there's no hope. Okay, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying it's something you need to be aware of and to train yourself out of.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So both men and women should, you got to undo the bonds that you've had made with your exes, if you want to say that.
Right.
Right? And this also explains why people run back to their ex, even though they've found someone that they might be in love with, but then they run back to their ex for one last.
Oh, you
fling.
used the example of the Titanic movie.
Yeah, bring that up. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, we did not see this movie, and I'm at a point now where I've kind of vowed to myself that I'm not going to.
We are proud to never see that movie.
It's a pride thing now. I'm never going to watch that movie. I'm not into chick flicks anyway, and from what I understand, that's what it was. Anyway.
But the chick flicks in general, but go ahead and talk
yes,
about
okay.
Titanic.
No, we can bring in culture and movies and stuff and how that affects all this. But I think you said the point of the movie was that she was on the boat. Okay, look, again, don't know the story. She was on the boat. She has an affair with Jack. Was that his name?
Leonardo DiCaprio.
Well, yeah, whoever. I don't like him anyway. She has an affair with him and then tosses him off the door or whatever she was on, and he drowns or whatever. And then she goes and she has to marry this other guy. I know I'm doing a
engaged.
hatchet job on this movie, and I just don't care. But the point of the movie is she goes back and she still has affection for the first guy.
She's telling the story. The movie, the whole movie is her on her deathbed or close to it at 90 or whatever, telling this story, which is the movie Titanic. And the story, and you think, this woman has been married to her husband for decades. And on her deathbed, all she could think about is that first guy who
she bonded to
through sex one time.
Was it one time? I don't know
how many times because we didn't see the movie. Nah. But it was at least once. But they did all these things together that, in a sense, bonded them.
Yes.
And unfortunately, they didn't solve the problem of Jack drowning.
Yeah,
freezing to death.
Yeah.
But anyway. But that's what she's thinking about.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you think about a lot of chick flicks, I should say, like The Notebook.
I know you hate that one.
I hate that movie. This is a story of a woman who, well, besides how the guy gets into dating the girl, I can't remember. It was Ryan Gosling, and I can't remember who it was.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't care. And I don't even remember their names because I never saw that movie, but I know the story. And
we watched that movie with my parents.
I don't know about that. I know I read the book, and I hated it.
Okay, whatever.
But the point is, forget about how he attracted her. Because that was like, don't follow his example, gentlemen. Don't do that. But they end up dating when they're young. And, and then now he goes, I guess he went to serve in the military. He was gone for a while.
Yeah.
And she's now engaged to this nice guy.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not a nice guy, like a bad guy that's quote unquote nice, but a gentleman, a nice guy. Maybe he's a little boring, but he's a perfectly nice guy.
Yeah.
And she's happy to be married to him, but then Ryan Gosling's character comes back and poof, that connection is still there, and she's happy to cheat on her fiance with Ryan Gosling and then end up getting married to Ryan Gosling instead. And it's supposed to be this love story, but it's like, what the heck? And there are a lot of, I can't remember the rest.
I just thought it through like 3 or 4, but that's kind of the...
And this is what culture is throwing at you,
okay,
right?
And that's what we were going to talk about. I think I've discussed before in previous episodes. I think I've talked about the whole romance novels and all of that nonsense. And I will tell you right now, the last romance novel that I read was, I think I was 17. And my mom... If you've listened to previous episodes, you know that was a toxic relationship right there. My mom got me reading Danielle Steele, and she's probably one of the worst as far as writing that garbage. Oh, it's garbage. But I don't remember what the name of the book was. I think she's one of these authors who was writing a book every 6 months, and it was just the same claptrap nonsense, all over and over again. But, I mean, this book, I had read all of her books up to that point, and it's probably 6 or 7 at that point. And it had,
How old were you?
17.
17, okay.
Yeah. And this one had every kind of depravity that you can think of, right up to including pedophilia. And I got halfway through it, I closed it, stuck it back on the shelf, and I picked up a Stephen King novel or something. I was like, I'm out. I can't do this anymore.
I need some horror.
I read a lot of Stephen King after that. I just had enough. Oh, and I don't think I've touched one since, unless you include the classic, classic books that I read, they're not romance
What are you
novels.
talking about, like Jane Austen?
Yeah, I mean, some of that, sure. But I just really, as much as we condemn porn and men who are addicted to porn, we need to, with the same fervor, condemn women who read that crap, because it is the same thing. It's the same thing. It titillates you. It makes you look around with dissatisfaction at your life, at your husband. Dissatisfaction. That's what I said. With dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction. At your husband, at your life, at your house, at your, your job, whatever it is you're doing, those books are going to make you look at every color. They're going to color your view of everything. And I'm not into book burning, but hey, I'll burn them. I don't care. I just don't care. Those things are awful, and they destroy. I've just talked to so many women who read those things on a consistent basis, and then they turn around and they gripe about their husbands. And I'm going, why are you doing this? Yeah. Why are you doing this? Because those stupid... Okay, the books are... Let's be honest. These books are written by single women.
Maybe, but keep going.
Or gay men. These books are not written by women who are happily married. And are happy with their lives. Just like money. And now are happy with their lives, happy with their marriages, happy with their children. Those women are not happy. They're not.
Okay.
And it's just, it's garbage. And then, I think we've talked enough about chick flicks too. That's the same thing. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
What are you feeding yourself? You're feeding yourself Lucky Charms with marshmallows. That's what you're doing.
Yep.
You make a steady diet of that, you know what's going to happen. Your hair's going to fall out. You're going to get wrinkles. Yeah. You're going to get pimples. You're going to get fat. You're going to feel sluggish.
Okay.
But
the point is, you read that stuff, and your husband doesn't live up to the
gay man's image of a whatever he's written in that book.
The image of the billionaire, or the vampire, or the werewolf, or what was the other one? The pirate.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah. Muscles and all romantic and oh my goodness.
You know what they leave out of those books?
What?
All those men in those books, they still sit on the toilet.
Yeah.
With their pants around their ankles. That scene is never portrayed in any of those books.
That's true.
If I have to pop somebody's bubble that way, then that's how I'm going to do it.
That's true.
It's
even, we talked about this, even Snow White with the prince. You know? Forget about the new Snow White. I'm talking about the old one that was good.
Yeah.
After Snow White and the prince got on the horse, I mean, there was no music playing in reality.
No.
They were just clip-clopping away, and it's like, where are you going? The prince had a big house, but, not everybody can be a prince, so what are you going to do?
Yeah. They still had to live together.
They still had to live together. They still had to make the bed. They still had to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
They still had to eat and do whatever other crap that they had to do, And that's life.
Yeah.
But if you do it together, and anyway, we'll get into that.
Yeah.
You do it together, you can make a great life, but it's not that picture.
It's Disney. Just that there's so much, like,
we're
right
spending
now,
too much time on this.
Yeah, we are. But I mean, like right now we have Amazon, right, for TV. Mm-hmm. And how many channels are there? 500.
You can stream anything.
But literally every week you can see some trailer for some stupid new show, right? And most of the entertainment rotates around sex, getting to sex, having sex,
what happens after sex.
What happens, and that can be good or bad. It's usually bad if they're portraying a married couple having sex. But and think about that. If an unmarried couple in a show is having sex on the regular, it's hot, it's spicy, it's, it's all of that. But once this couple, and we've seen this happen in multiple shows, once the couple gets engaged and gets married, the sex is boring. And now they're annoyed with each other. And all they can see is what they don't like. And sure. You see it on almost every TV show. So this is what our culture is feeding us.
Yeah.
And we've been married 35 years, and we're not bored.
We're not bored. But marriage has been hard work.
It has.
But it's been rewarding.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you done?
I don't know.
With that rant?
We'll see.
Right.
We'll see.
Okay, we'll see. All right, where was I?
Somehow we got sidetracked with culture. We were talking about the Titanic.
Well, that's okay. Titanic.
Oh, you were talking about how the girl will always dream of her first the guy she first bonded with. That's what you were talking about.
Right. And that might not actually be the first guy, but it's the first guy who she felt the connection with.
Right.
There was some excitement.
Yeah.
And often it's the guy who's not good for you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Bad boys, whatever you want to call them. And, you end up getting bonded to this guy, and he doesn't treat you well, but there's enough excitement that you stay. Yeah. Rather than going with the guy who's got a good job and he's got a routine and suddenly he's boring, But the thing is, if you get married, as a side note, it's only boring because you let it be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Marriage is work.
Yeah.
We'll keep saying that over and over. And if you don't want a boring marriage, then do stuff to make it not boring. Yeah. It's not that difficult.
Right.
It's not that difficult. And it is simple. You just got to do it. I think the difficult part of it is we're all not taught how to be married together. Mm-hmm. And we're not going to talk about that. That's what this whole podcast is about.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about, just bonding and stuff. But, we don't do the things that we need to do to be married mm-hmm. and to have a successful relationship, which is what we want.
Right.
Anyway. Okay. So I said before, and I'll just do this. I'm not saying there's no hope if this is your situation. Mm. And if you are younger and you've never had sex, or you've only had a partner or two, and I don't know, you've explored it or whatever, you just gotta realize what's going on.
Right.
Okay. And if you've never had sex, then I'm saying wait till marriage. And there's a reason, and there's a lot of reasons, we'll get into that. But there's a way to do this. And you said, the articles, like, these girls go off to college and they're 18, and I read it too. There's
an expectation.
There's some expectation. And and again, if you read that article, we'll put it in the show notes, but if you go read that article, it talks about...
I don't want to put it in I'm sorry. I don't want to put it in the show notes. I feel like there was too much information in there and too little valuable information. I can read some blurbs from it right now if you want me to.
Sure.
But I don't...
We're talking about it.
Okay.
But I was go ahead and pull that out. I was referring to where was it? You said 46%. 46. Here it is. 43% of women regret losing their virginity.
Yes.
And that's 18, and I kind of think there may be higher numbers than that. I think we deceive ourselves, and so when you talk about a survey, but at 43%, that's still a high number.
That's a very high number.
But I almost think it's a lot more. I think there are some women who fall into the category of hookup, and they've done it so much that they don't have the ability to bond as well.
Right.
And they're either deceiving themselves about how they feel, or their friends are deceived, helping them stay deceived.
Yes.
I could see that. And I'm just talking about women there. Men, they have different problems.
Yeah.
Again, they've trained themselves in the wrong way. But yeah, you're right. I mean, the article, I thought it portrayed men in the as if it was all men taking advantage of these girls, right? Where they didn't just regret losing their virginity. Oh, I shouldn't have done that kind of thing. It was more of a, I felt pressured, But the thing is, they were drunk, right? Maybe both of them, and they both made the decision to do it because that's what they wanted to do. And then the girl comes back later and says, "No, it was assault or something," and that's why men are. I mean, you see all this all over the place, and so the article portrays men in this bad light. And I think there's a small subset of men who are happy to go out and hook up with multiple girls.
Right.
Not just in college, right? Going to the clubs, going to bars, stuff like that. So go ahead. The
flip side of that, though, is they don't talk about how men are also victims, for lack of a better way of putting it. Statistically, boys these days are exposed to pornography around 8 to 10 years old. And it's not just, oh, I found my dad's Playboy.
No,
it's
online,
vile, disgusting, bondage, all of the worst kinds of porn that you can think of is what these young boys grow up thinking is normal.
Yeah, that's true.
And then they get a twisted version in their head of what a woman is supposed to look like, how she's supposed to act, what she's supposed to say, what she's supposed to do around him. And unfortunately, a lot of these boys also don't have fathers to help them sort all that out, or, "Dad, I saw this thing and it really bothered me." They're not having those conversations.
Right.
Because dad's not there. Yeah. And that's just a statistical reality at this point. So by the time they get to college, they could be addicted to porn. They've almost certainly seen it. Mm-hmm. In some way, shape, or form, they've seen it. They've probably seen some of the worst of it.
Maybe.
Been exposed to it. So... and they don't have anybody to help them, to talk to them and sort all that out and know that's not the way women are. Don't look at women that way, son.
Right.
Women deserve your respect and your admiration, and you're supposed to do this with women, not that. Yep. So those conversations aren't happening. So that's kind of the flip side of that. So you've got those guys going to college, and then you've got these girls who've been brought up in this feminist culture that says, yeah, sex doesn't matter. Just have as much as you want. There's no consequences. Here's the pill, which has very serious consequences. There's no there's STIs. That's what they call them now. That's no big deal. They can be treated, whatever. There's all these outs, right? Sure. So they send these girls off to college with that mentality. That sex is no big deal. Just get it over with. It's going to be fine. Mm-hmm. And that's a toxic stew right there. It's really bad. Right?
Yeah.
I've got the two little...
Go ahead.
All right. So I'm just going to quote this article from Evie magazine. We could link the magazine and you can...
Well, I think if you're going to quote it, we need to point to the article.
We can, but
you're telling him we've already talked about the article.
Yeah.
You can decide whether to read it or not, but I think it was slanted.
It was, and it
made both sides are victims.
Yes.
Of their culture.
Yeah.
Not just the girls.
Right.
And they talk about a sexual assault and.
Yeah. So yeah, like, there's a trigger warning right there. I mean, if you.
So I'm not denying that it happens, but I think in the minds of society, it's been redefined to include the regret that the girl might feel, the woman feels after the fact, but she's still the one who made the decision.
Yeah.
Right. And she can say she felt pressured, but she wasn't, maybe, but not all the time.
Right.
So I think when you feel this regret, you come up with excuses. Right. And like I said earlier with the neurotransmitters, guys don't experience that same consequence. They don't. They won't feel regret.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean they aren't damaged in some way, but they don't feel the regret, so they don't end up reporting it.
Yeah.
I mean, because they don't care. They had sex.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas, and that's the problem with guys, is one of the problems is they don't feel the care.
Right.
Right? The consequences of it. Whereas women can.
Right.
And that's normal, but anyway, so all of that to say that we think the article was a bit slanted. So we'll put in the notes, but just keep that in mind.
Right.
All right. So your quotes.
So okay, well, I took out just 2 paragraphs here, and I'm only going to read parts of these paragraphs. So, a disappointing first time having sex is not just an innocuous blip. It colors a girl's future experiences of sex to be bleak as well, and sets her up to have poor self-regard, body image issues, low self-esteem, and a heightened risk of intimate partner violence. I don't know how that... Anyway. A boy with a disappointing first time will face 0 negative effects on his future interest levels of sex. And that's kind of what you were...
Right. So again, there is damage done to the boy, to the guy, but that statement I think is still true.
Right.
From a what was it? 0 consequences from the future interest level.
Yeah.
Right. He doesn't regret it.
Yeah.
But the damage I think is underneath.
Right.
That you don't see until later.
Okay.
And I've talked about that. But
okay.
Next,
teen sex is evergreen in her favorite television shows and movies, which is what we just discussed, which whip up profits off of glitzy draws of youthful romance while omitting the distressing pitfalls of such affairs. Let me skip down here. The pop feminism that wallpapers most social media apps and major websites are egging her on to treat sex with a mind so open she shouldn't even think about it. Elite Daily, which is some other
that's another
publication,
magazine.
okay, whatever, writes, an open-minded attitude towards sexual exploration is inherently feminist, or consciously waiting to have sex will ruin the chemistry and the excitement around sex.
But that's not true.
Yeah,
That's
sex
what they're saying.
isn't supposed to be a planned activity, but fun, adventurous, and unexpected. This is the feminist view, right?
Yeah. But outside, yes, it should be fun and adventurous, but outside of marriage, that's the picture they're presenting.
Yes.
Is what the publication is saying.
Yeah, wasn't
right?
there a TV show on HBO called Euphoria, and that's what it was?
I never saw that.
I thought it was about teens doing drugs and just having sex with each other, and it was portrayed as this kind of glamorous...
Well, I'm sure it was.
I don't know what it was. I heard it was glamorous, I heard it was disturbing, but that's pretty typical of the teen entertainment.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and they also quoted in this article Teen Vogue, which is just garbage at this point.
All right.
Anyway.
Okay. So, so we've talked about the neurotransmitters that we want to use properly again, and we'll get into that at the end, right? So hang in there, right?
This one may end up being 2.
I think it's going to be 2.
Okay.
2. I'm not sure where we're going to cut it. So what I'm going to do next? So we got two things to do. I'm going to talk about all the non-religious, or a big set of non-religious reasons.
Okay.
To wait until marriage. And remember, marriage is about being bonded together.
Yes.
What do the vows say? Even if you're not religious, the vows: forsake all others, no one else. This is why polyamory and polygamous marriages don't work.
Right.
Right? I don't care how they're portrayed and what people say about other cultures and stuff like that. Yeah, it's there, but it doesn't work the way marriage is supposed to work.
Mm.
So, where was I? Okay, so all the list of all the reasons, and then how to use this knowledge within marriage to make your marriage great.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we'll stop this episode here and cover those two subjects next time, and we'll get that episode out quickly.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
This has been Marriage on the Half Shell.
We'll see you in the next episode.